first lecture in the FWMI 2024 lecture series. I hope you all had an opportunity to get some refreshments and your Eclipse glasses, and if you didn't, or if you find that you may have some visitors, please feel free. I think we might have a few pair left, so you can take more than just for yourself. As to our lecture tonight, Dr. Carlisle Wishard is the Director of Science Experiences at the Evansville Museum, where she manages the Cook Immersive Theater and Planetarium, and she also manages their STEM programming, just to highlight a few bits of all of the things that she does. Dr. Wishard got her bachelor's degree from the University of Alabama in 2017 in astrophysics. So I'm going to tell all of you this because I already told her. So I'm researching her and trying to learn a little bit about her so that I can introduce her, and I saw astrophysics. I only have heard of one other person who has a degree in astrophysics, and that's Rajesh Kuthrapali, and he's a character on The Big Bang Theory, and that's a television show. So I know a real person who has that degree, which is crazy. But in all seriousness, then she received her PhD from Purdue, in 23 in planetary sciences. And while Dr. Wishard was at Purdue, she was a graduate teaching assistant, and she also did an internship, oddly enough, at our Eastern branch, the Smithsonian Institution at the National Air and Space Museum. So as you can tell by her stellar resume, Dr. Wishard is the perfect person to talk to us tonight about this upcoming solar eclipse. Please help me to welcome.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay with this microphone? Okay, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here. As we mentioned, I'm a little bit new to town, so New Harmony, this is my first time visiting, and you guys have such a beautiful town here. I drove through downtown, that little main street, so cute, so happy to be here. So thank you so much. And of course, I'm happy for the eclipse coming up. I know you guys all know that we are having an eclipse coming up. Today we are going to talk about some of the science behind eclipses, why they're so rare, what you guys can do to safely watch one, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the history of eclipses and some of the scientific discoveries that have been made thanks to total solar eclipses. So we should have a good time. We're going to have plenty of time for questions and comments. But if you do have a question or comment as we're going through it, just raise your hand and I'm happy to have you interrupt and we can chat and that'll be great. Okay, so starting off, no such thing as a silly question. What is a total solar eclipse? And I know that this seems a little bit basic, but it is actually a little bit more complicated than that. So we're going to get into why total solar eclipses are really so spectacular. The first thing we need to do is obviously define the geometry of what a total solar eclipse is. So looking at this image here, we have three bodies. We have the sun, our Earth, and the moon. So I've labeled here, very basic, what is daytime side and what is nighttime side here on our Earth and the moon. So just like on the Earth, where half of the Earth is in daytime and half of the Earth is in nighttime, half of the moon is always in daytime and half of the moon is always in nighttime. It just depends on, the time of the month and which part is in daytime or nighttime, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. But I just want to point out here that this geometry is really important because of shadows. So as you know, a shadow is what causes the total solar eclipse, but it's a little bit more technical than that. When the moon is between the Earth and the sun, blocking out part of the sun's rays from reaching us here on Earth, there are actually two parts of that shadow that are relevant for total solar eclipses. The first is that penumbra there, and the inner part there, the darker region of that shadow, is called the umbra. So what happens during a total solar eclipse? If we are living directly in the place where that umbra touches the Earth, which New Harmony is inside that umbra, then you will get that total solar eclipse. So this is what makes them so rare. That shadow, that umbra touching the Earth, it's only about 100 miles across. So being on the Earth in that 100-mile window is what you have to have in order to have a total solar eclipse. Being in that penumbra is just not going to be good enough, and we're going to talk about why that is. So New Harmony, as I mentioned, is in that 100% inside that umbra, so that is what's going to give us that beautiful total solar eclipse here in just a couple days. But as I mentioned, a lot can go wrong with this. This is not a guarantee. Being in totality is something truly spectacular, and a lot of things need to align properly in order for us to get that total solar eclipse. The first thing that can go wrong is if you are not in that penumbra. So if you were to go just a little bit north or south of us, maybe you go up to Chicago or maybe you go down a little bit, and you are not inside that umbra, that 100-mile zone in which the shadow of the umbra crosses the Earth, and you're going to be in that penumbra, the best you're going to get is that partial solar eclipse there. So that's what you guys had here in New Harmony in 2017. Did anybody remember the eclipse in 2017? Okay, good. So you guys had a partial here in 2017. And even though 99% of the sun was covered during that partial eclipse, we still don't get that total solar eclipse. You still can never remove your glasses. You don't see the corona or the chromosphere or any of those other cool features that you see during a total solar eclipse. So I tell people, being in a partial total solar eclipse, it is nowhere near the same as being in a total solar eclipse. So what you guys are going to experience this time around is going to be much more spectacular. So yeah, if you are not in that umbra, that is something that can go wrong. Another thing that can go wrong is sometimes that umbra will miss the Earth entirely. The moon is tilted on its axis of rotation or revolution around the Earth like this. So sometimes the moon is a little bit above or below the Earth when it comes to its placement between the Earth and the sun. So if it's a little bit above it, that umbra is going to miss the Earth entirely, and the best that anybody on Earth is going to get is that penumbra partial solar eclipse. Something else that can go wrong is you can get an annular eclipse. We did have an annular eclipse, a partial annular eclipse here last year in October. Does anybody remember that? There was it was more closer into the southwest, and they were talking about the Ring of Fire eclipse and things like that. That's what this is. It's basically when the moon is a little bit too far away from the Earth, so it's a little bit too small to completely block out the sun there. So that's also another thing that can go wrong and not give us that totality. So we've talked about the things that can go wrong. How do we absolutely guarantee that we will get that total solar eclipse from where we are here on Earth? In fact, there's actually 5 things that we need to have in order to have a total solar eclipse. The first thing that we need to do is we need to be in this new moon phase. So that's a little bit of a confusing one, but basically a new moon is the phase of a moon in which the entire nighttime side of the moon is pointed towards us on Earth. So looking here, what we have is we have the Earth, we have the sun way over there, and we have all these moons around us here. This is basically just representing the moon as it is orbiting around the Earth. So in that new moon phase there, that one closest between the Earth and the sun, we can see that the moon is shining its umbra on the Earth. That is the place of the total solar eclipse. And it makes sense, right? If we want to have a total solar eclipse, we want the moon to be between the Earth and the sun. We can't have a total solar eclipse over here in a full moon, for example, because in a full moon, the moon isn't between the Earth and the sun, so it can't possibly block out the sun during a total solar eclipse. So really, this phase here, this new moon phase, which only lasts about 3 days, those are the only 3 days once a month in which you could possibly have a total solar eclipse, when the moon is between the Earth and the sun. The next thing we need to have in order to guarantee that totality here on Earth, that we're going to get a total solar eclipse here on Earth, is we actually need to be really far away from the sun. So if we think about it, if we want the moon to be able to completely block out the sun, we want to give that itty-bitty, teeny-tiny moon a little bit of help. So we want the sun to be as small as possible in our sky so that the moon can block it out, right? So if we want the sun to be as small as possible in our sky, we need to be as far away from it as possible. So our orbit here, as the Earth goes around the sun, it makes one orbit around the sun every 365.25 days, so once a year. That's what dictates the length of our year, is one orbit around the sun. And our orbit is not a perfect circle, and the sun is not at the perfect center of this orbit. So there's a place in our orbit here, a time in our year, in which the Earth is just a little bit closer to the sun than it is all year. And there's a time in our year in which the Earth is just a little bit farther from the sun than it is all year. So this point of farthest reach here, this is called apoapsis, and this actually occurs in July. So I know that's a little bit counterintuitive. Sometimes people think that our seasons or our weather are caused by how close or how far we are from the sun. That's not quite true. Our seasons are caused by the tilt of the Earth's rotational axis, not by how close or how far we are from the sun. But being this far away from the sun does mean something important for total solar eclipses. It means that the sun is really small in our sky. So as small as we can possibly get. I mentioned this is in July, so April, not a bad time to start looking for total solar eclipses. The sun is pretty small in our sky. Just to emphasize this, the difference here between the sun in our sky at this point and the sun in our sky at this point, it's only about 3.5 percentage points, excuse me. So 3.5 percentage points, you're not gonna notice a ton of difference, but we really need to give the moon as much help as possible to be able to block out the sun. So we want the sun to be as small as possible. Now on the flip side of that, if we want the sun to be as small as possible, we want the moon to be as big as possible. So as the moon is orbiting around the Earth, we want it to be at that closest point to us here on Earth. Once again, you'll notice that this is not a circle, and the Earth is not at the center of this orbit, of the moon's orbit. So getting that moon to be close to us, have you guys ever looked online and you've seen like, oh, go outside, it's a supermoon, go see the supermoon outside. A supermoon is when the moon is full and really close to us, so it appears really big. What we want is we want that moon to be really close to us here on Earth, so it's really big and it can block out the sun. And to give you a little bit of a perspective here, the difference between the moon at this close point and at this far point is about 14%. So the moon actually does have a significant difference in our sky throughout the month as it's orbiting around the Earth. So being at that closest point is going to give us the biggest moon that is able to block out the sun. The next thing that we need to have in order to have a total solar eclipse, this one's kind of the hardest to wrap your brain around. Basically, we need the moon and the sun to actually cross in our sky. So what we've done so far is we've made sure that the moon is roughly between the Earth and the sun. We've made sure that the moon and the sun are roughly the right size so that they can block each other out. But what we need to do is actually fine-tune this. So we need the sun and the moon to actually cross in our sky, because if they don't cross, we're not going to get a total solar eclipse. They're just going to pass right by one another. So being at this place called a node, this is the place where the moon's orbit crosses the Earth's orbit. They kind of cross at an angle like this. So if you think about it, only at these two crossing points where these two orbits intersect will you actually get the moon and the sun passing each other in the sky. So this is the fourth thing that we need to have in order to have a total solar eclipse. And the fifth thing, which I'm sure you guys already know, is you need to be in the path of totality. As I mentioned, this path of totality, it's only about 100 miles across. It does carve out a significant amount of North America this time around, going from Mexico up into Texas, into the Midwest, and then up towards the Great Lakes and even into Canada. So it is a long path of totality, but it is very, very narrow. And if you're not in that path of totality, again, you're just going to get a partial eclipse. So here in New Harmony, you guys will get 3 minutes and 54 seconds, which is actually 54 seconds longer than us in Evansville. So you guys will actually have a longer eclipse than we will have in Evansville, but that's okay. So those are the 5 things that we need to have in order to have a total solar eclipse. So understanding a little bit more of that science behind total solar eclipses kind of emphasizes why they are so rare, why they don't occur frequently here on Earth. That's a little bit of a lie, actually. They do occur frequently here on Earth about every 18 months, but they usually occur over places where nobody lives, the Arctic, the ocean, places where nobody is around to actually see them happening. So the fact that, they cross somewhere on land and somewhere on land that is incredibly populated, like North America, that is what will make this event so incredibly spectacular. So with that, how are you guys going to watch one on the day of the total solar eclipse? Does anybody have plans, by the way? Does everybody have plans? Hopefully everybody has plans. Okay, we can talk about more of those plans later. But why is eclipse safety so critical? And this is something that when I do field trips, as I mentioned, we've had over 2,000 field trip kids into the museum to talk about the eclipse in the past couple months. And one thing that they all want to do is look directly at the sun. And I have no idea why they want to do that, but they all just want to look directly at the sun. And so I have to tell them, you don't want to do that. Your eye has a lens in it. And if you've ever taken a magnifying glass and you've ever burned a hole in a leaf by focusing the light of the sun through the magnifying glass into the leaf, your eye has a lens just like a magnifying glass. So when you look directly up at the sun, the light from the sun is focused through your eye's lens, burning a hole on the back of your eyes. So incredibly dangerous. It will happen almost instantaneously. You will sustain temporary or permanent eye damage. Not worth it. Just use proper eye protection. It's really, really important so that you can have a safe and fun day on the total solar eclipse. So what are some safe ways that you can watch a total solar eclipse? One of the big ones is pinhole projectors. They can be both natural and unnatural. If you have a colander in your house, like one you use for spaghetti or pasta, all those little holes in there will take the light from the sun, focus it into a pinpoint, and then project it out onto the floor. And so you'll see all those little partial crescent suns reflected on the ground around you. You can do that with a colander. You can do that with a specially made pinhole projector, which is this. This is basically just a piece of paper with aluminum foil taped to it and a tiny little pin poked in the aluminum foil. You can do it with a box. So if you do the same thing with a cardboard box, you can look through the box, and that's a little bit, you can see that projected on the back of the box there. And then a natural way to do it is actually just to look at the side of your house or your apartment as the trees filter the light through little tiny gaps between the leaves. You'll get those crescent suns. Yeah, they're really beautiful. They're kind of just like spectacular when you see them. So that's another really fun way to watch the eclipse as it changes your environment around you. Another way you can observe the eclipse is through telescopes or binoculars. I will encourage you to make sure you are doing this safely. Any sort of filter that you place on your binoculars or your telescope or your camera should be done on the place where the light is first intercepted, so the initial lens that is gathering the light. It should not be done on the eyepiece, because if you're doing it on the eyepiece, like if you're putting a solar filter on your eyepiece, what you're basically doing is you're taking in all of this bright blazing light, filtering it through onto this tiny pinprick, and then it will burn right through your eyepiece and hurt your eye. So if you do get a special filter, totally awesome, encourage it. If you have a telescope, get a cool solar filter. They're not that expensive, but make sure it's one that is there on the front part of the telescope or binoculars. You can also use mirrors to reflect the total solar eclipse. So you can take a mirror, hold it up, and kind of take the light from the sun, mirror it down so it's reflecting down onto the ground. One other thing that I have to point out here is do not look in the mirror at the sun. It's not like Medusa or something like that. Like, it's still going to be just as dangerous looking at it through a mirror as it would be looking directly at it. So using mirrors is a really cool way to do it as long as you're doing it properly. And then, of course, the best way, in my opinion, to watch a total solar eclipse is with glasses. This is a really great way. They're pretty cheap. Lots of places around town are having, selling them or giving them out. So I would encourage you to look into glasses. Make sure if you are buying them on your own that you are making sure that they are approved. Unfortunately, people aren't always as wonderful as we hope that they are, and they are making cheap glasses and they are selling them on Amazon. And those glasses are not approved and they could not be safe. So make sure you are getting them from a reputable dealer. The AAS, the American Astronomical Society, has a list of online websites where you can go to buy reputable, safe glasses. So I would encourage you to do that. One thing I want to point out is if you have little ones in your family, they tend to be really tempted to lift the glasses off and hurt themselves when they're staring directly at the sun. So you can make these fun little paper plate masks by just sticking the glasses, cutting a little hole in the paper plate, sticking the glasses through them, and then they're not as tempted to kind of lift it up and blind themselves. So being safe, everybody having a great time, that's what the total solar eclipse should be about. So with that, we have talked quite a bit about the science behind total solar eclipses. We've talked about how you can safely watch one. What I want to do now is kind of divot to how other people in our past have used total solar eclipses and have experienced total solar eclipses. So first we're going to talk about ancient mythology. The first total solar eclipse in written record was in 1223 BC. So we have been recording total solar eclipses for thousands and thousands of years. This one was recorded on this kind of clay tablet here, written in Ugaritic, I think is the language. So this is what they've recorded on this clay tablet here. On the 6th hour of the day of the new moon, so they also knew it was a new moon, on the day of the new moon in the month of, I apologize, I cannot pronounce that, but that is in late February, early March, the sun went down. Its gatekeeper was Mars. So they were recording this total solar eclipse in their history, and they were being very scientific about it. They were noting the date, they were noting the month, they were noting the phase of the moon, and they were noting which planets were near the eclipse at the time of this eclipse. So for us as scientists, this is wonderful information because this allows us to verify exactly when this event occurred. And it then allows archaeologists and researchers to take this clay tablet that was written about this event and use it as a touch point to kind of chronologically order everything else that they have from this culture. So they're really able to use this as a very finite way of getting a date on something, which is a very special thing. But my favorite part of this clay tablet is actually, this is the front of the clay tablet. On the back of the clay tablet, they have their own thoughts about what they experienced during this eclipse. They say 2 livers were examined, danger. So what they were doing was they were using goat livers or sheep livers to do divination. So these are clay models of sheep livers that were from this same region around this same time. These were used to kind of study what the liver looked like of the sacrificed goats and then make conclusions based on that. So these were people, they saw a total solar eclipse, they freaked out, they panicked, it was something super scary, and so they had to sacrifice 2 sheep, examine their livers, and try to predict what was going on. So I really think that this is an incredible mix of their scientific knowledge and what they're recording for us, as well as their own lived experiences, and understanding that these were really terrifying events for people back in the day because they didn't have the scientific knowledge that we have today to be able to predict these, to understand these, and to understand why they occur. So I just love this. I think this is really, really cool. Other cultures around the world have also had mythologies surrounding total solar eclipses. A lot of them do have a similar theme. It's some sort of creature or demon eating the sun. That's a pretty common motif. So in Hindu mythology, they have a demon that eats the sun. In Chinese mythology, they have a dog that eats the sun, and one of their heroes, one of their gods, is shooting down that dog to protect the sun. Native people in South America, the Incan Empire, also had mythologies and stories relating to total solar eclipses. And all of these events throughout mythology, throughout history, have been, for the most part, dire events. They have not necessarily been happy, they have not necessarily been fun, they have been altering, life-altering, dynasty-altering events in some of these countries. So these are really big deals, and as a result, there is a lot of mythology and a lot of historical records keeping records of total solar eclipses. But they haven't all been bad. Total solar eclipses are also a great way to understand more about our place in the solar system, our place here on Earth, and understand more about the world around us. So they have been used recently and in the distant past to understand more and make some scientific advancements. So we're going to talk about that here as we kind of wrap things up. So Hipparchus, he was a philosopher in ancient Greek. He was one of the first scientists and philosophers to be able to approximately predict eclipses. So while they were recording eclipses and while they were keeping detailed records of them for thousands of years, we haven't always been able to predict them. It really takes a little bit more knowledge about how the Earth, Moon, and Sun are related in order to be able to predict them. So total solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, regular solar eclipses, they were able to use those to determine the distance between the Earth and the Moon, the size of the Moon, the size of the Sun, and be able to kind of understand a little bit more about how all of those bodies are oriented up there in space. More recently, we have also been able to use them to track solar physics. So the sun goes through cycles, roughly 11 years or so is one solar cycle. And during a solar cycle, the sun will reach what's called a solar maximum and then a solar minimum. So over those 11 years, the activity on the sun will increase and then it will decrease. And this is notably marked by sunspots. If you've ever looked at a picture of the sun through a special filter, you'll notice there are spots along it. More sunspots means more solar activity. Less sunspots mean less solar activity. But during periods of high solar activity, we also see really intense bits of corona around the sun. So the white wispy stuff around the sun will get really extended, really vibrant and bright during periods of intense solar activity. So we have been able to track these solar cycles during totality when the sun passes or when the moon passes over the sun, giving us that corona, and we're able to measure that corona and how intense it is. We are able to track these solar cycles. And I will actually say, we are today, this year or so, quickly approaching solar maximum. So solar maximum will be probably 2025. So the sun is very active right now. So during totality, that corona is going to be hopefully very bright, very vibrant, very big, and just really cool active. Whereas comparatively, 2017, we were closer to solar minimum, so it wasn't as vibrant in 2017 as it's going to be this time around. So that's pretty cool. We've also learned a little bit about some of the elements that we have here on Earth. Helium, one of the most abundant elements in the entire solar system, and we think in the universe, was actually discovered thanks to total solar eclipses in 1868. So this is what's called an emission spectrum of helium. Basically, it's all the different wavelengths of light that go into helium. And that yellow one there is incredibly indicative of helium. It's a pretty recognizable signature of helium. So these two scientists here, Norman Lockyer and Jules Janssen, were studying the sun during a total solar eclipse. They were studying the types of light that were coming off of the sun during a total solar eclipse. And they both noticed this really bright yellow band indicative of helium. So they together kind of jointly discovered helium, the element, and they named it helium, Helios, after the sun, because they discovered it while studying the sun. Other people have also used this kind of spectroscopy technique to study the sun and think that they find new elements. Chromium, that was a proposed new element. It was actually debunked. It is not a new element. But what they found was these really bright bands of what they called coronium here in the emission spectrum of the sun. And while it's not a new element, what that did help people do was determine how hot the sun is. So that band there, we later learned it's iron. Iron only becomes ionized like that, superheated ionized iron, at temperatures over 1,000,000 Kelvin. So that is blazing hot. So being able to study how hot the sun is from here on Earth just by looking at these kind of spectrum bands is really cool. And that's not something we had ever done before, but this was done during a total solar eclipse. And we can't leave out our favorite scientist, Einstein. Einstein and his theory of general relativity was also verified through total solar eclipses. So originally, when Einstein and other scientists at the time noticed something was a little bit strange with Mercury, the innermost planet in the solar system. Mercury is the smallest planet. It is closest to the sun. And what they noticed was that Mercury was moving a little bit strangely. They couldn't predict it. They didn't understand why. It was behaving in just a little bit different than how their scientific equations had predicted Mercury should be behaving. And they thought, if Mercury is being tugged on by another planet, a planet we haven't found yet, between it and the sun, maybe that could explain some of its little deviations in its orbit. They named this imaginary planet Vulcan, and during total solar eclipses for years and years and years, scientists would look for Vulcan. We think, well, because Vulcan they thought was so close to the sun, the only time you'd be able to see it is when the sun was dim, when the sun was blocked out by the moon. So total solar eclipses, they spent years searching for Vulcan and not finding anything. So they were like, okay, well, if this planet doesn't actually exist, why is Mercury behaving so strangely? Answer, general relativity. So that was a kind of an add-on, a proof for Einstein, not that he needed one, but this was a pretty good one for him. And finally, we can see general relativity even just looking at an eclipse. So basically what general relativity and the theory of relativity does is it relates space and time to as this kind of fabric that exists in our solar system. So if you've ever been on a trampoline, when you sit on the trampoline in the center, you notice that things roll towards you, right? You are a heavy weight on that trampoline. And that's what stars, big massive stars, are in the fabric of space-time. So you can imagine a star sitting on a trampoline, drawing everything just a little bit closer to it. And so what that does is that actually bends space-time around the star. So what we're looking at here is during totality, we are seeing the sun and the moon crossing each other in the sky, and we're seeing a background of familiar stars. These are stars in Taurus, stars we see every single night. They are stars we know. But when the moon and the sun, when the sun in particular is right there in that zone of the sky during totality, we notice the light from those familiar stars is actually shifted just a little bit. It's bent around the light of the sun, bent around the weight of the sun. So we're seeing that light from those stars way back here from behind the sun being bent around the sun, proving that the sun does sit a little bit on space-time, causing that warp in space-time. So that's another really cool thing that we found out due to total solar eclipses. Finally, I want to wrap it up here and leave plenty of time for thoughts and questions. I do want to leave you with a couple parting thoughts and tips. First of those is plan for traffic. We are expecting a lot of traffic into the tri-state on that day. I know Evansville and the Evansville region is conservatively anticipating about 80,000 people. I don't know how many you guys have been here, predicting here for New Harmony, but it's going to be a lot. Not only people staying in our towns, not only people using our restaurants and our hotels and things like that, but just passing through as they try to get up to Bloomington, up to Indianapolis, up to places with longer bits of totality. So being understanding of newcomers to our area and trying maybe not to go across town for your dentist appointment, being understanding about that. I know you guys did have an awesome presentation last time about how to photograph the eclipse. I would totally encourage you, if you want to photograph the eclipse, that is an awesome thing to do. But I would also encourage you, if you're maybe not as comfortable with a phone or with a camera and you don't have the right equipment, you can still take photographs. Just take photographs of your friends and your family and your loved ones and the people reacting. Because truthfully, in my opinion, when I look back through my scrapbooks and my photo albums, I want the photos with my friends and family. I want the photos of people that I know and care about reacting to these special events. Everybody else will be, clicking up there. Turn your camera just for a moment and take a picture of your loved ones. So I think that's going to be a pretty meaningful shot for you later in life. Enjoy the eclipse even if it rains. Even if it rains, make sure you go outside, watch that dip in darkness there. It is going to get very dark. Even if we have clouds, even if we have rain, it is going to feel like nighttime for 3 minutes. For you guys, 4 minutes. So make sure you are going outside and you are still experiencing it, even if the weather isn't that great. This one's a little bit, don't do anything stupid. Our first responders, they have enough to worry about with the traffic, with the cell service, everything like that. Don't make yourself a problem for our first responders. Try to just, don't try to climb on the roof of your building to take pictures and get stuck up there. Basically, that's what I'm saying. And then finally, enjoy it. The next one here in Indiana isn't until 2099, so I do not plan on being around for that. But we've got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity here in the tri-state, and I think it's going to be a really, really amazing opportunity for us. So we should enjoy it, not stress ourselves out too much trying to get the best shot or trying to go the best place, just having a really nice time. So that's all I got for you. I would love questions. I would love comments. I appreciate you guys being here. Thank you so much. Yeah.
I ask you two questions.
Of course.
One is, how long ago do you think you knew that this was going to happen Monday at 2 o'clock? And then the other part of the question, this is not related at all.
Okay.
If you're a person like you, and you're the person you are at the museum, and you get asked to do this, is this the coolest thing you've got to talk about, or is there something cooler? Or do you show up and say this is really dumb to talk about, but I hear today?
That is a great question. Both of those are great questions. So we are able to predict eclipses pretty far into the future. As you can see, we can predict 175 years from now. So we did know that this was going to happen here in Evansville, but really knowing and preparing are two totally different things. So you guys have known that you would have one here in New Harmony forever, but preparing institutions around town, preparing people for what they're going to witness, that is a completely different animal. So yeah. And then, is this the coolest thing I've got to talk about? Yes, I am so excited for the total solar eclipse, as you probably can tell. I am just really, really excited for this day. So yeah, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me personally to be in this position, in this location, at this time, talking with you guys. So yeah, awesome. Question?
Does the moon have an elliptical orbit around the sun?
The moon has an elliptical orbit around us here on Earth. So the moon orbits around the Earth.
Yeah.
Yes, the moon has an elliptical orbit and the Earth has an elliptical orbit. Most orbits are actually ellipses. Very few, if any, orbits are circles. Even if they appear circular, they are squished just a little bit. So ellipses, yeah.
Next, you said the full moon happens when the moon is behind the Earth, between the sun is between the Earth and the moon, right?
So a full moon is over here. So you can see that the full bright light of the sun is shining on that daytime side of the moon, and that daytime side of the moon is pointing to us here at night.
I was wondering where the full moon got its light.
The sun. Yeah, so
and it bend around like you were describing?
So this image is a little bit simplified. Basically, unless the moon is like perfectly aligned, in which case you would get a lunar eclipse. So a lunar eclipse is when the Earth casts a shadow on the moon. Unless it's perfectly aligned, the light reaches the moon just fine, like we have here on most full moons. So yeah, the moon doesn't make its own light, only stars make their own light. So it's just reflecting light from the sun.
One more.
Okay.
You talked about the moon and the sun crossing. It's actually just the moon moving, the sun doesn't.
The sun doesn't move, that's true. But what you need to have is it needs to be a place in which the Earth's orbit crosses the moon's orbit. So our orbit here on Earth is basically reflected as the path of the sun across our sky. So, because we're standing here on Earth, we don't notice that we're the ones orbiting. We see the sun orbiting, which is why for hundreds of years people thought the moon or the Earth went around the sun, or the sun went around the Earth. So yes, we need the path of the sun to cross the path of the moon, the orbit of the Earth to cross the orbit of the moon. Yes. Any other thoughts or questions? Yeah.
When is the next moon or eclipse?
Oh, the next lunar eclipse? I actually do not know. They are more frequent because they don't require as fine-tuned of an alignment. Does anybody know?
There was one last night.
Was there really? Well, I missed that, so I'm here focused on solar eclipses. I missed the lunar eclipse. But yeah, they are pretty frequent. So yeah, we did have a full moon here in the last couple of days, so they're pretty, I don't want to say common. Full lunar eclipses aren't common, but they do happen once or twice a year maybe, so.
But
yeah.
they can predict them just like the sun?
Yes, they can. If you go on like I think it's like timeanddate.com or like weather.com or something like that, they can give you a whole list. Yeah.
Sorry, which way does the moon orbit here? Clockwise on your side?
It goes from a new moon to a waxing crescent to a first quarter, so I'm bad with that, but something like, yeah, somehow like that. Yeah.
So my question is, so you said that Mercury acted differently during an eclipse.
It acts differently all the time. But
So would that kind of include a Mercury retrograde going hand in hand with an eclipse?
so I'm not totally on the up and up of like astrology and stuff like that. I don't know much about that. So when you're talking about Mercury in retrograde, it basically, correct me if I'm wrong here, it's when Mercury appears just for a couple of days to go backwards in its orbit. Is that not it?
4 weeks.
4 weeks. Oh, okay.
It's going backwards in the sky.
Gotcha, a longer period than that. Okay. So that is just due to our placement here on Earth and how we turn and how Mercury turns and how the sun turns. What I'm talking about more is over thousands of years. What happens, and we do this too, it's called precession. Our orbit, our elliptical orbit, basically, if you've ever played with like a spirograph, where they were toys when I was a kid, is you put a pen in it and a spiral, yeah. That's what our orbit does. So over thousands of years, we precess in that orbit. And so Mercury was doing that, but a little bit more than they thought it should be. And they were like, why is it doing a little bit more? What is something else tugging on it? And that's why they thought of that fake planet. So I don't know necessarily that they're related. Mercury is a bit of a confusing one for everybody. It's an oddball.
But it's getting ready to go retrograde on the 1st, and it will actually be retrograde during the eclipse. That's why I was asking.
That's a great question. And that's a good point too, actually. During the total solar eclipse, I believe all the planets, all or maybe most, will be up. So during totality, keep a lookout for Mercury, keep a lookout especially for Venus. Venus is very bright. You should see Venus with your naked eyes. You should see Jupiter with your naked eyes. So look out for the other planets because this is your only opportunity to see planets during the day. So it's going to be really, really cool. So yeah, great. Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah.
Somebody suggested to me to take a picture of the eclipse by putting your phone in selfie mode and face the other way. What do you think?
Putting your phone in selfie mode.
Shoot it over your shoulder.
Oh, like this? I honestly, I don't know. okay, I'm a bad photographer. I'll just admit it. I am not good at photography, not even with a phone. So when I try to take pictures of like the moon, it always comes out terrible. So I'm not so sure if you would even get a good photo with the sun, but I don't know. You did have a previous talk about how to photograph it, so I probably could have learned something from that. So, but yeah, I mean, maybe you can try it. One thing people, mostly children, are trying to do is I get questions like, oh, if I keep my eyes closed for 20 minutes before the eclipse and then I open them, will I see all the stars and stuff when it's really dark? Because during totality, it's only going to be 3 minutes, so your eyes probably won't adjust quick enough to see stars. But then kids are always like, I'm going to challenge that, and I'm going to keep my eyes closed for 20 minutes. So we'll see. Any other thoughts or questions?
I am still stumped by the fact that you're not going to make it to 2099.
I would be 105, so oh, thank you, okay. I'll try my best. All right, well, if there are no further questions, I'm gonna stick around. I really appreciate you guys being here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, that was wonderful. So we're all doing the math. You know, you said you would be at your age.
I'm 29.
Okay. Everybody was
I'll
like,
be 30 this year.
that's very funny. Well, thank you so much for being here. The Friends of the Working Men's Institute give an honorarium to our keynote speakers. So, no, we thank you. Thank you for coming and educating us today. It was just wonderful. How about one more round?
Thank you.
A few wee bits of housekeeping. If you liked this lecture and you are not already a member of our organization, we have these, and our treasurer sits right back there, Mrs. Paula Schmidt, and she will be happy to sign you up if you're not already a member of our organization. And our next lecture is May 22nd, and that's with Mr. David James from WNIN, and he does the 2 Main Street program, so that should be really interesting. And finally, our scheduling coordinator, Mrs. Donna Creek, is sitting back there, and we have a book sale coming up. And Donna has her sign-up sheet. So if anybody wants to sign up to work a shift at our book sale, you can see Donna after our lecture and bring your books, because we're going to sell them. And Director O'Kicki, anything?
Couple of things. Thanks everybody for being here tonight. Next week, April 4th, 6:30, we have author Tristan New Year is going to be here talking about the book, the novel she wrote, Starfall. It's got a new harmony event. She is one of the recipients of last year's Lena Feiner Memorial Research Grant. Now this is not that program, that's another program that's coming. But kind of book signings and book talks don't do real well here at the Working Men's Institute, so I hope that's what I'm telling you now. Come to the WMI that night, you can see part of the program. Also that same night, while we're in here, the kids are going to be having the STEM story time, our new STEM area in the back corner. So put those two things on your calendar. Thanks again for everyone for being here tonight. We are going to be open the day of the eclipse, so if you need a nice lawn to look up, come to the WMI. We'll be here all day that night. Thank you.
I did bring a couple pinhole projectors if you wanted to hand those out to people. They have like